This is Vote Her In, a collaboration between two broads talking politics and author Rebecca Sive. Today's guest on this special impeachment episode is Jill Wine-Banks. Hi, everyone. I am Kelly, and this is Vote Her In. Vote Her In is a collaboration between two broads talking politics and Rebecca Sive, who is the author of Vote Her In, Your Guide to Electing Our First Woman President. We are coming to you on the day of the second impeachment of Donald Trump, so we will have a lot to talk about. And here to introduce our guest is Rebecca Sive. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Kelly, and so glad we could be together today. This is a remarkable day and a remarkable week, as we were just discussing before we went on air with our extraordinary guest. I have to say she's a remarkable woman and has been for a long time, a particular expert on impeachment and related matters, and that is the Watergate girl herself, Jill Wine-Banks, a dear friend of many years and someone you can always look to for the kind of information that we need today and we'll need on the going forward now that the House has passed the article of impeachment today. So without further ado, I think we're going to just jump right in. And Jill, welcome. And if you would, share with us your sense of the state of play and your analysis of what's going to happen next, what we should be looking for, whether the 25th Amendment or the 14th Amendment options are off the table. And just if you would just go for it, please.
Okay. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you for all you've done to empower women. And thank you, Kelly. It's been an extraordinary day. What I want to talk about today is what happened in the last week. And that includes Tuesday, when two Democrats were voted into the Senate from Georgia, a Black pastor and a Jewish PR person. So that was a pretty extraordinary day. And then on Wednesday, it was the day that is the officially called for day in Congress to acknowledge the votes of the Electoral College. A mathematical computation is all that is required. Those votes have been confirmed by every state and are sent and put in a mahogany box to be opened and counted. That should not be a big deal, but this year, President Trump decided that he would hold a rally and encourage his supporters, who became a group of insurrectionists bound to undo the election and to undermine our democracy. He spoke to them. He said, go and march and go and fight. Go to Congress. Stop the steal. He told them what to do. And now it appears that there may have been, in addition to the Congress members who spoke at the rally and to the Congress members who voted despite the absence of any evidence that there was fraud in the election, they voted to not uphold the votes of millions and millions of Americans in certain states, despite the absence. That is also what I would consider to be undermining democracy. And the mob followed Donald Trump's action call. They climbed the walls, they broke the barricades, they broke the windows, they smashed open doors, they beat up a number of people, police officers. They killed one, and at least 5 people died during that episode. But mostly they hurt democracy. They forced the vice president, the Speaker of the House, the majority leader, to take cover from the damage they were doing. Offices were vandalized. Property was stolen, including laptops, which is a security threat of great importance to us. And now the Republicans are saying, oh, no big deal. He's going to be out of office any day now. Well, that's not enough. Yes, his term expires next Tuesday. At noon, he is gone. He's done. But he needs to be barred from ever holding office again, which means that he must be impeached, convicted, and a separate vote must be taken after conviction on what the sentence is. The sentence is removal. Well, that's already happened because he will be out of office by the time that vote is taken. But there is another penalty for impeachment, and that is a permanent bar to ever holding office again. So I would say that impeachment must proceed even if it happens after the inauguration of President Biden. There are other options. There is resignation. He could leave office now, but that just means that he could be indicted sooner. As an aside, I believe that the president could be indicted while as sitting president. I do not think the Office of Legal Counsel opinion is correct, but nobody doubts that he can be indicted federally and by states after he's out of office. So criminal action must be taken. Civil actions can be taken to hold him accountable for so many things that he's done, including super spreader events that have led to deaths. And the 14th Amendment also allows a possible avenue of approach. The 25th Amendment, unfortunately, McConnell has already said, that there will be the vice president rather has said he's not going to start anything under the 25th Amendment. So that would take the vice president and the cabinet to say he's unfit for office. So that's out of the ballpark. I think resignation is equally out because there's no way that this president, with his mental, psychological issues, and I have a podcast called Intergenerational Politics, and we had Mary Trump as a guest. And if you listen to that, you know for sure that he will not resign. It is just not within his psyche to be able to do that. So resignation, 14th Amendment, 25th Amendment, probably not going to happen. The only thing that can happen is that we've now impeached him, not we, the Congress, including at least 10 Republicans voted to impeach him. So he is now impeached twice, the first president in history. And now the trial can begin. And the evidence seems pretty apparent to me.
Could you also talk about the issue of the constitutional question, as I understand it, whether he can be tried after he's out of office?
There seems to be historical precedent in the 1800s for trying someone after they are out of office. So he can be tried. He can have a full trial and present any defense that he might want to present. And of course, evidence can be presented that shows why he should be convicted on the charge of inciting a riot and the other specific acts that are named in the article of impeachment. There's only one article of impeachment. And to me, the evidence is clear. That evidence includes what we all witnessed. And you have over 535 witnesses who were endangered in the House. And then you can add to that the vice president. You can add to that all of the police presence that was there, and every television or newspaper or radio reporter who witnessed this and whose lives were endangered. All of those are witnesses to what we saw. And then there were thousands others who were at the rally. We have audio of the rally, so you can hear the president's words. But let me say that the evidence has to go back at least 4 years and to all of the things that he has said, but probably focusing mostly on starting with right before the election saying it's rigged if I don't win, and then continuing the lies, the lawsuits that were brought saying that there was fraud involved, that there's something wrong with the election, that he won and that it's been stolen from him. Those are the words that have caused people to actually believe that there's something wrong with our electoral process that has revved them up to being angry. And who wouldn't be angry if that was true? But of course, it's not true. There is no evidence to support that. And so we need to present the evidence that shows there's no fraud. Every state certified its results. Every state had recounts wherever it was requested. Georgia had 3, and 3 times he lost, and yet he challenges the results in Georgia. There is nothing to be challenged. And if you look at some of the things that he claimed in Georgia, for example, there's one person that if you follow normal mainstream media, if you just do a normal Google search for the name Ruby Freeman, you will only find that name on far-right extremist websites. She is, and I'm assuming she's a real person, but for all I know, they made her up because they made up that she did all sorts of terrible things to interfere in the election. This one person is responsible for thousands of fraudulent votes, for feeding in votes that were for Biden 3 times, for stealing ballots and hiding ballots and all sorts of strange things, none of which has any support or evidence. Courts thrown out every attempt to bring in anything, saying this is ridiculous. There is now a possibility that the Trump campaign, Trump, his lawyers are going to have to pay penalties because our law allows for having expenses paid by the losing side when the lawsuit was frivolous, when there was no legitimate basis for the lawsuit.
So, Jill, going back a second to the impeachment matter and the resignation matter, there was somebody who wrote, I believe in the last day or so, that perhaps he would resign the day before so that a then President Pence could pardon him.
Yes.
What is your view of that? Or I know what you said about Mary Trump's view, but what do you think about that in the current circumstance?
In the current circumstance, there are a couple of things I would add to the conversation. And of course, because I consider Donald Trump virtually, I'm trying to think of a polite way to say it, as being unhinged. Okay, he's unhinged. I don't know what else to call him. It's hard to predict what he will do. With a rational person, you can make certain predictions, but I don't think he's rational. So it's hard to know what he will do. I said months and months ago that one way out for him was to resign. He could have used the 25th Amendment actually for himself. He could have resigned saying he was temporarily unwell and making Pence the president with all the powers of the presidency, get a pardon, and then say, I'm cured, I'm well, I'm back to office. Yes, he could wait until the morning of the inauguration and fly away and having resigned. And I love the image because one of the most vivid images I have in my memory is Richard Nixon at Marine One holding up his double-handed victory sign just before he flew away to California after resigning. And I would love to see that repeat itself with him flying away and it would only be a courtesy because, by the way, he doesn't have a right to be in Marine One or Air Force One after he is not president. It would only be that the president would grant him the courtesy of leaving that way instead of, having to take the train back to somewhere. But whether he will resign to get a pardon also involves the recognition, as happened with Richard Nixon, when he was offered the pardon, President Ford sent a young lawyer to San Clemente to offer him the pardon, but to bring with him a Supreme Court case that says accepting a pardon means admitting guilt. And it was important to President Ford that Richard Nixon recognized that in accepting a pardon, you are admitting your guilt. So he would have to admit that he is guilty of crimes in order to accept a pardon. That could be hard. And also because some of his crimes involve financial penalties and civil consequences, it would then be, you've admitted the action, you've admitted you did this, therefore here's the civil penalty. So he could get into trouble by admitting his guilt that way. On the other hand, he would avoid going to federal prison. There is much to be said about the states prosecuting him. And I have Letitia James as a guest. I'm interviewing her on Friday, who is the Attorney General of New York, who is hot on the trail of many crimes by Donald Trump. And he certainly could suffer those penalties. No pardon from the president will do that. The other thing is, I have to say, although I'm shocked that even though Pence was endangered by what Trump did, and even though Trump did not call him at any time until today, and even though Trump did not respond to calls by many people saying, we are in danger, please call off your mob, please tell them to get out of here. He did not. So if I were Pence, I don't care how loyal I have been to him for 4 years, how much I have made myself subservient to him. In danger, and his wife and I think brother, and there were 3 guests of his with him. They were all in danger from this. So is Pence going to be so likely to say, I forgive you and I pardon you? I don't know. Right. What does it mean for his future in politics? Is he done, or does he still have some aspirations for something? I don't know. And I think that we need to think about, all of those elements as we evaluate whether he would resign in order to get a pardon. He could just as easily try a self-pardon, something I believe will not be upheld by the courts, something I believe to be not within his power. But he's gotten away with a lot of things that I would have said aren't within his power. So who knows?
We are right now, as you mentioned, just a week away from the inauguration of Joe Biden as president. Mitch McConnell has already said he doesn't think there is time in the next week to do the Senate hearing for this impeachment, that he thinks they should focus on a peaceful transition of power. I think the boat has sailed on that one. So what are the implications if the Senate hearing happens after the start of the next administration? What does that do for the Biden-Harris administration's ability to pursue their legislative agenda, the priorities, the appointments of cabinet members that they want to get in place? I mean, of course, how lengthy an impeachment hearings and trial can be. So what would that mean for them?
Let me start by saying there is time for a trial. This is not a trial with complex evidence. This is a trial where you play a few reels of tape, show a few tweets, show the mob, have 1 or 2 members of Congress testify as to the danger they were in, have the family of the slain Capitol policeman, maybe the policeman who was crushed in a door, luckily survived, have the news reporter who was almost thrown off the balcony by one of the mob. It wouldn't take a lot of evidence to show what happened and what the precipitating cause was. The proximate cause is clearly President Trump's words at the rally and his weeks and months of saying that this was an unfair election. So it could be done long before the inauguration. And frankly, what does a lame duck Congress do anyway that's so important? And it has nothing to do with the transition. It doesn't, period. The transition takes place in the cabinet departments. So that's a ridiculous excuse. As to what happens after, well, you don't have to do it in the first 100 days. Let them get their people confirmed, all of the cabinet confirmed. Let them get the vaccination program underway in a way that will allow many of us who are listening to this right now to be vaccinated and safe. The slow pace that's going on now is because the Trump administration took no responsibility and did not do a national plan. The Biden administration has one already in mind, in place, ready to go, and will make things happen faster. I asked Secretary Sebelius, who was Health and Human Services, whether it was actually possible to do what Biden has promised, which is 1 million vaccinations per day for the first 100 days. And given how few we've given in the weeks that we've had the vaccine, it made me worry that he was promising something that wasn't deliverable, and she believes that it is deliverable. So let's get all that done and then turn to the trial. And we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Members of Congress don't ever do just one thing. So they could have a trial and still go about business. That's what we would need to do. But I think James Clyburn, who is just a phenomenal member of Congress, has said, let's not even think about the trial until after the first 100 days. Let the Biden administration get started. Let them get the cabinet confirmed. And then we can turn to this. Nothing's going to happen. The first and major reason for proceeding so quickly was as an attempt to get him out of office. But if he's already out of office, then the only question is, are you going to impose the second sanction, which is to say he can never hold office again? And that's worth having the trial for. It's also worth having the trial because, frankly, when I look back to Watergate and say, we got hoodwinked and we didn't get to indict Richard Nixon because the pardon came faster than we could indict. And once he was pardoned, there was nothing that we could do. This is something that's not going to go away. He is now permanently impeached twice. And the trial hasn't happened on this one. And it can happen at any time with the consequences. And it needs to happen not only for the consequence of barring him from office in the future, but because if Richard Nixon had been convicted, either on impeachment without resignation, which he did, or in a criminal court, maybe Donald Trump would have thought twice before engaging in the conduct he's engaging in now, because he would have known that there are consequences. And he didn't know that because, in a way, Nixon not got away as much as he did because Nixon had to resign and be humiliated. He's the only president who's ever resigned office, and he did it clearly forced to do it by his own party, who said, we've seen the evidence, the facts are clear, we cannot support you. And today, 10 Republicans did the same thing, and there are at least a couple of senators who will do the same thing. You need a lot more than a couple to convict because it takes a 2/3 vote in the Senate to convict. But I believe it's possible. I believe once he's out of office and they all realize the damage he has done to the party, to the country, to democracy, to the Congress, to all of us as voters who are threatened by him, to all of us who are living in fear of what's going to happen in the state capitals in 50 states, and what's going to happen on the 20th of January at inauguration. How safe is that going to be? How much force will be necessary to keep the peace? The fact that we're talking about this disturbs me enormously.
And related to that, Jill, two points. One is, I understand what you're saying, and it makes a whole lot of sense regarding having to do the trial. I wonder if you could speak to the issue of not what the legal aspect of it is, but really the sort of political aspect of, the fire flames up again, so to speak, when the trial happens. And related to that, if you could talk a bit about what our listeners and their circles of friends and their organizations and all the rest of us who care about democracy should be doing over these next few days, to your point about the dangers we all face.
I think that we are deluding ourselves if we think that this is going to go away if we ignore it. I do not believe that for a second. Donald Trump, unless he cannot run for office again and therefore con his supporters into giving him more money to continue his lies, is going to continue raising money and lying. And he is going to continue revving up the people who voted for him, and we will stay in serious jeopardy. The only thing that will stop him is if he cannot run for office, he cannot therefore raise money from them for that purpose. And he would have to spend his own money to go out on the hastings and try to convince people that he's telling the truth when he's lying. So I think there's no way that healing the country happens without some accountability and recognition of the damage and the wrong that has been done to us. And that the Republicans who are today calling for unity, that is, I mean, I can't even answer it because it's so absurd. Some of the arguments that I didn't mention before, but one was it was just free speech and you can't punish him for free speech. Well, free speech in America accepts when you call for violence. You can advocate for violence if there's no danger that it will happen immediately. He was the proximate cause of an immediate violent reaction, and it was foreseeable by any reasonable person. So you cannot punish speech, but you can punish speech that is intended to and succeeds at creating insurrection. Tell me again the second question.
Well, you were speaking about healing, which is, I mean, I can't even conjure up how important that is for all of us. And in that context, I wondered if you could talk about what we all should be doing in the days and weeks ahead to help heal, make sure this trial happens the way it should, what kinds of activities our listeners ought to maybe think about and engage in. I know they're anxious to hear from you about that, and we may close with this call to action of yours.
So I think, first of all, we all need to stay safe, which means, unfortunately, wearing masks, staying socially distanced, and in light of the danger, the Biden transition and inauguration committees has asked everyone to stay home. Please watch the inauguration on your television. Watch it on your computer. Watch it on your phone. Do not go to Washington, D.C. So, I mean, that's a sad thing. I was a Biden delegate. I've been denied a convention, and now I'm denied an inauguration. But it's the right advice. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to keep encouraging, particularly Republicans who have so far supported. So we're here in Illinois, and Adam Kinzinger was the first Republican to come out and say he would support this action. And I think we all need to support him and to give him encouragement to keep this up, because he's going to be under a lot of pressure. So will everyone who spoke in favor of impeachment. So it's not enough to thank the Republicans who joined what makes sense, but let's make sure that anyone who spoke today and who voted today, which is every single Democratic member of the House, let's make sure they know that we are supporting them. And, public protests played a very major part in Watergate on a number of occasions. The first was the Saturday Night Massacre, which was when, for listeners who don't know, we had subpoenaed tapes. The president was stonewalling, saying, no, you can't have them. No, you can't have them. The courts ordered him to turn them over, and he said no. And so the special prosecutor, Archibald Cox, had a press conference at which he explained why we needed the tapes, why we had a right to them. And he was fired for that. But he couldn't be fired without the attorney general doing it. And the attorney general said, no, I don't have cause to fire him. I'm not firing him. So Nixon fired the attorney general. The deputy attorney general became the acting attorney general. He refused to, so he was fired. Then the solicitor general took over, and he carried out the order. And there was a massive public protest. 3 days after that, after the special prosecutor had been fired, and as had the attorney general and deputy attorney general, Richard Nixon was forced to do a U-turn and to say, okay, I'll give you the tapes and I'll appoint a new special prosecutor. I'm not abolishing your office. That was the power of the public protest back then. We are in a different time now because of the social media landscape and the media landscape. We had 3 networks, and that was all. And all 3 had the same facts. We debated the meaning of the facts. We didn't debate that they were facts. Nowadays, you have Fox News with one set of information and everybody else with a different set of information. And that has led people to believe things that are just not true and to act on those beliefs. So we're in a different time, but I do think that public protest can matter. And I think a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump are unbelievably stunned by what he did and caused by his mob and by the fact that it was organized. And now there's an investigation of whether members of Congress, aside from speaking to encourage people to do this, actually led a reconnaissance of the Capitol so that they'd know where to go and how to do this. That is grounds for immediate removal from Congress for criminal indictment. So I think the laws need to be maybe somehow made clearer to make sure that we understand what's prohibited. But they're plenty clear now, and there are plenty of crimes that were committed that were clearly violated, and those need to be enforced. We cannot shy away from indicting members of Congress, indicting the president, indicting anyone who encouraged this action, and anyone who participated in it, of course. So that's what I think people can do, is make sure that they support the people who are trying to convict the president on impeachment and indict him and get him convicted in a trial.
On that note, Kelly and I want to just thank you, Jill, for sharing with us and giving us your analysis, and our listeners. And for our listeners who want more information, please go to the Two Broads website and you'll see a list of links to Jill's work. And if you have other questions about what you can do, I'm sure they'll get answered by a bit of talking to your friends about how much we have at stake and how important it is to do education of each other. So thank you, Jill. I know Kelly wants to say thank you as well.
Yes, thank you so much. This was incredibly informative.
Thank you to both of you. And if I could put in a plug for my book, The Watergate Girl.
Yes, please do.
I hope everyone will try to read it. If you want a really personal view of what Watergate was like, I do not mention Donald Trump until the epilogue, because I really focus on Watergate and how democracy and justice prevailed, and how sexism was alive and well, and what I did to combat the sexism, but my own personal life that was a mess at the time. So it's a good read, I think, and I hope they'll enjoy it. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to vent on this very historic day of Donald Trump becoming the only president in American history to be impeached twice.
Yes.
Yeah. A good thing in our view, I think. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
The Vote Her In segment is a collaboration of Two Broads Talking Politics and author Rebecca Sive. Our theme song is called Are You Listening, off of the album Elephant-Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.